Scott, Tiffany, love and live more. I'm here with Angelo. Angelo, you just shared a great story of how you got involved in missionary work in Honduras. Let's rewind a little bit, and if you can tell our audience, about 4 years ago, you were working in was it the banking industry?
I was working in medical devices.
Medical devices. Okay, so you're working in the medical device industry, making really good money, and you had started going to the house that had a school of ministry, and after your school of ministry, you felt a call. Let's start with that.
Yeah. So my wife and I have always been passionate about missions, and honestly, if we could do missions all the time, that's what we would do. And so after the School of Ministry, we went on a mission to Honduras, and the name of the ministry that we went to serve as is Nueva Esperanza. And at that time, I still had a job, and we're trying to figure out how to make it work. And at one point, the Lord spoke in clearly and said that you have to leave your job and walk by faith with me. And like I said, I'm like, how is that going to happen? And with all and everything, there's bills to pay, and then there's all these things. But when we went to Nueva Esperanza, we fell in love with the ministry, and we learned and realized that they are trying to raise funds to build a career and training center. So the career and training center is halfway, and they're trying to raise funds for that. And so when I came back to the U.S., I thought, you know what, I want to raise $10,000 to support that training center. And a friend of mine said, well, what's the difference between 10,000 and 100,000? And I said, well, if I can raise 100,000, I will quit my job, because there's no way in my own strength I can do that. And so fast forward, I came back and then shared to Hope Church, the church that we are members of, about the ministry. And we said that we would lead a team if anybody's interested. And so we had a team, but then COVID happens, and then we didn't get to go. And then later, a couple of years ago, we went back and served in the ministry. But what we learned later is that Hope Church had partnered with Nueva Esperanza and started supporting the church. And they did a long-term partnership, and in my head, I did the math. That is 144,000.
So which was over the 100,000.
So over 100,000. Okay, I did my job. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good.
God did His job.
Yes,
He showed you.
He showed me.
The 100,000 is from Yes. So then you quit your job.
And so I had quit my job.
Yeah.
And in our last trip, on the way back, we got an email from our church saying that they are going to raise money to pay off the debt on the new building that they just built, which is a sanctuary. And it's over $4 million. And they said that they will be tithing whatever we raise. And it's a 3-year fundraising. And as of last week, they've already raised $2 million.
But part of the funds that they're raising is also going into Honduras.
Yes.
For your career training center.
So they would tithe whatever they raise towards the career training center of Nueva Esperanza.
Wow. So they're tithing to that. And when you look at 2 million at 10%, 200,000, that's a pretty nice chunk of change.
Yes.
So the bottom line is the career training center. You shared a little bit about one. Let's look at the boy you shared with. The boy that is part of the school, the career training center. It's an on-the-job training type situation, and where you're involved is getting these children to rise into their giftings and callings. And let's talk about this young man.
Yeah, so So background is there's 180 kids in the ministry,
Yeah.
and everyone has a story. But I specifically met Ever because I was working in the construction, sanding one of the railings, and I made just a short chat. They don't speak English there, so I spoke in Spanish a little bit, and then he responded in English. And then for the next half an hour, we chatted in English, and I said, how did you learn how to speak English? And he said, well, I taught myself. In fact, actually, I want to learn 5 languages. And I chuckled, and so I made a joke, and I spoke in Japanese because I knew some Japanese because I lived there before. And then he responded in Japanese. And I was just like, okay, so Ever, I got curious, what do you want to do when you grow up? And he said, oh, I want to be a robotics engineer. Well, among other things, because there's so many things I want to do, and I want to continue learning. And I asked him, so what do you do in your spare time and your relationship with the Lord? And he said, well, I find a corner in my house and I pour out my heart to God.
When you talk house, you're talking a room that's maybe 10 by 10.
Yes.
Or 10 by 20 if it's a big house. They've got 6 people in their family that live in this living quarter. Mm-hmm. So when he says I get into a corner, he's literally in a corner.
Literally in a corner.
Yeah. Pouring his heart out to God.
Pouring his heart out to God. And so we were kind of like sharing with each other.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Well, what he didn't know is I know a little bit of background about him.
Yeah.
That's when we were chatting. That was June.
Yeah.
But earlier in the year, his mother, who was the breadwinner, committed suicide. And when she committed suicide, like all hopes were gone.
Yeah.
And they ended up leaving school, him and his twin brother, and started working and selling tortillas and cutting hair, which ended up that instead of being able to help and support their family, what happened is they were able to pay for their transportation and 1 meal a day.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
And so the ministry, Nueva Esperanza, has to pivot, and they said, you know what? We can't wait for the Career Training Center to be built.
Yeah.
We should start that now.
Yeah.
And so for them, what they did is they put them in a work-study program.
Yeah.
The deal is that if they continue studying, they will allow them to work in the ministry and get paid so that they can meet their basic needs, their food, clothing,
Yeah.
and provide for their family.
Yeah.
And
which is really, I mean, when you think about it, if you've got your sole breadwinner dies, and you're in a third world country, you're pretty much done. I mean, there is no hope. But because of the ministry, which also is being sponsored by the people at the Hope Church, this is how it works. As far as your dollar in Honduras goes so much further than here in the United States, and as we flow, we're just trying to do our thing. We're trying to, serve God, right?
Serve God.
You heard, and he showed, hey, I got this, and now you look at the fruit, and you're seeing not only this young man who speaks fluent in 3 different languages, but probably 5 now. But he's learning. He's learning. But he's got that desire. He's got that hunger.
Absolutely.
And it's because of the ability for us to pour into ministries like that. That's what it's all about. So we want to get behind these ministries. We want to be able to support and Lord willing, and He is willing, God is going to continue to provide that $200,000 in a few months for a ministry that is so valuable in Honduras. I just needed to get your story. So I really thank you, Angelo, for sharing your story with Love and Live More.
Absolutely.
There was one other part, though, before we leave. His brother. You'd mentioned his brother also.
Yeah. We went to McDonald's, funny, last February, March, with them, and when I was chatting with them, his twin brother is Diego, and I asked Diego if you don't have to worry about anything, what would you really want to do?
Yeah.
And he said, I want to travel the world sharing about Jesus. I I want to tell people how great and how much love God loves us. And I was like, what do you mean? He said, like an evangelist? Yes, like an evangelist. And I said, where would you start? And he said, well, I will start in Honduras because this is where I am.
Yeah.
And then he said, I believe that every child needs to be heard.
Yeah.
They have a voice because God needs or God loves children.
Yes.
He loves to hear from his children.
Yes.
And this kid who, like what I told you, who's been through a lot,
But just lost his mother.
just lost his mother, could have
From
lost
suicide.
faith,
Yeah.
and comes around, tells me that to share God's love and how much God loves them
Yes.
and how God loves everybody.
Yes.
It's just amazing for me
Yeah.
to hear.
Yeah.
It's
That's the God that we have. That's the God that we know. So, for what it's worth, I hope you enjoyed this little story of two young men in Honduras who you and your work have given them hope where there seemed to be no hope. So we bless you, Angelo, and your work, you and Sarah. We thank you so much for what you're doing. Scott Tiffany, love and live more.